Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Jeremy Schumacher. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the Jer in Wellness with Jer. Thanks for stopping by, listening to the podcast, or watching on the YouTube, wherever you're consuming this media. Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, who's ready for story time about Mario Kart? We're not actually going to talk about Mario Kart today. That is an elaborate ruse to not get my video blocked. We're going to talk about the ethics of unaliving a CEO via red shell or blue shell in Mario Kart if your playable character is Luigi. The internet is a dumb place where now talking about a topic like this is all weirdly drawn out. No one wants to get their account blocked or get put on a list as a terrorist. Uh, so yeah, let's talk about the psychology, the cognitive biases involved in this Mario Kart based example. It's really hard to be neurodivergent and talk about this because there's so many things I want to say, both about like the ethics of actual blue shells and red shells in Mario Kart, which is missing the point because it's a game that's designed to be an unknown as opposed to a skill-based race. So Nintendo doesn't care about your ethical quandaries. They want the game to be fun, and there's a random chance involved in that funness. Um, And like this is a topic I wanted to do right away. And again, it's just been sort of weird to like watch media personas talk about it uncomfortably. And I think that's because we don't really know what's happening with the next presidential administration and how retaliatory they will be. But obviously, you have an unethical CEO. You have several unelected officials who unethically have too much money, and you have the wealthiest cabinet since 2016, which was the previous wealthiest cabinet, because of course you do, because this was always about making money off of a political station. So I think people are uncomfortable given the current political climate to talk freely about this, but I think we need to look at what sort of is going on and what the argument even is by the mainstream media, which has been captured by the billionaire ruling class, and why it's then like hard for other people to talk about. So, in case you've been living under a rock, allegedly, Luigi Mangione, who is allegedly not allegedly he's going to be on trial soon, but allegedly shot a CEO of United Healthcare in New York a couple of weeks ago and was charged as a terrorist. And the internet has thoughts. I too have thoughts. So we're gonna talk about that. That's what's really not about Mario Kart at all. So let's start with some of the cognitive biases that the media, and I would say just like propaganda in general, is trying to take advantage of, and then like what the some of the issues are for you, perhaps not a consumer of mainstream media or somebody who's not super on board, but feels not super on board with a healthcare for profit system, but maybe it's like I don't know if I really want to advocate for violence. That doesn't seem great either. So we're gonna talk about that. So I think the first thing that I, I watched like Chris Cuomo, and again, I don't watch mainstream media either. I don't own cable, so I think this was on CNN, but I just saw it clipped somewhere, and it's like, all right, I finally sort of have my angle to talk about this. Um, has been talking about like the CEO. I didn't even like look up his name. Brian Johnson, Thompson. I should know. Bry guy from United Healthcare. Um, as an identifiable victim effect. So this is plays on a mix of different cognitive biases. First one is appeal to emotion. The second one is identifiable victim effect. When we have one particular victim of an event or one particular group that's the victim of an event, our empathy is much higher for that. And so we can have an appeal to emotion like, but think of, this guy's children. Isn't that terrible that they don't have a dad now, in spite of the fact that like he was divorced and didn't seem to be particularly involved, allegedly, in his children's lives. Also, the internet's a stupid place because you just have to say allegedly a bunch. I don't know these things for facts. I'm a therapist, and these people weren't my clients. If they were my clients, I couldn't talk about it. And as a therapist, I can't diagnose the people. So we're just talking about this stuff in general. Um, and so trying to say, like, look at this one particular victim while ignoring the conversation, the wider conversation, which is it is unethical, clearly, to deny people life saving healthcare or just preventable illness healthcare for profit. Putting profits above human life is unethical. And so the fact that United Healthcare can turn $1 billion profit is already unethical, let alone tens of billions of dollars in profit is unethical. And the idea that they're getting more and more profitable by denying more people care is just like deeply unethical. But where the cognitive bias comes in is you have one person, the CEO, the victim of a shooting, versus sort of an amorphous group of people. Everyone, most people have probably, if you're an American, a uniquely American problem, like gun violence. Uh, it's almost like these are policy choices and could be prevented if we changed our policies. But you have sort of an amorphous group of people, all the people, 6,000 people a month who are affected by our for profit healthcare system, denying them the care that they need. A lot of people, a lot more people are affected by that. A lot more people know someone who personally is affected by that. And so mainstream media is fighting this information battle of like, this is a very relatable thing. People know people who are affected by this, who can't afford their medication, who don't go to the doctor. Like, I don't get healthcare as often as I probably should because I, A, don't like going to the doctor, and B, hate dealing with insurance companies because as a mental health provider, I've had to deal with insurance companies for a big chunk of my career, and they are a pain and they do not have patient welfare in mind. They are not about providing care and services to people. They are about making a profit. So, like, I don't like dealing with that system, which means I don't go get the healthcare that I probably should on a fairly regular basis before it even comes into like, who knows about how much this stuff will cost. Just like, man, do I have to pull out my insurance card? I don't want to deal with that. So we have a large group, but it's amorphous. And again, this plays on some cognitive biases for humans. We struggle with large numbers. To say each year over 100,000 people are affected and 100,000 people die, their lives are ended from negligence, from not being able to get the care they need, from getting denied for the care they need, for not seeking medical care when they need it, from this for-profit healthcare system. And so, I've seen different things like the worst terrorist attacks. We're going to call Luigi a terrorist. The state of New York, not the rest of us. When I say the word "we" there, if he's going to be a terrorist, the worst terrorist attack ever on American soil is 9/11, right? September 11th. About 3,000 people were killed in that terrorist attack. And so we look at having a 9/11 every week through healthcare. We have 52 weeks in a year and over 100,000 people a year. So yeah, that math checks out. We have more than one 9/11 a week based on what we're talking about, almost two 9/11s a week. And so, like, yeah, that makes it a little bit more relatable, but 3,000 is already a number that our brains don't fathom that well. The example I always use and how human brains struggle with large numbers is like, I am a Green Bay Packer fan. Got on the green and gold today, even following a loss. I don't care. I still support my team. And so the Lambeau Field, the home stadium, historic stadium, best place to watch a football game. If you've never been, go to Lambeau. Holds over 70,000 people, right? So there's a number I have in my head. I can picture Lambeau. I've been there multiple times, multiple games, stadium's packed, and I'm always baffled at both how many people are in line for concessions, how many people are using the bathroom at one time, the traffic to get in and out of the stadium. Interstate 43 drive home is brutal. And so the idea of like I can fathom 70,000 people, and yet I have all these ways in which my brain can't actually process that many people in one place at a time. I can sort of visualize 70,000 people as a full packed stadium at Lambeau Field, but I can't, and the people who set up the stadium traffic and deal with the interstate traffic couldn't fathom either because they didn't build a system that's capable of handling it, how to deal with that many people at one time in one place. So the human brain struggles with large numbers. I would say we can conceptualize 3,000, and also like there's some blanks in that. So trying to conceptualize 100,000, trying to conceptualize 6,000, like versus one, that identifiable victim fallacy. It's not really a fallacy. It's just like an effect. That idea that we can identify one victim versus this larger and also more amorphous group plays into sort of how mainstream media is trying to talk about this. Um, the other big bias that comes into play when the defenders of the billionaire class, who are paid by the billionaire class, like Jeffrey Bezos buying the Washington Post, I forget what conservative leaning person has made CNN more conservative, but like some rich oligarch. I was going to just say some rich asshole, but let's call them what they are, the ruling class, um, where they're coming in with some of these biases to try and message what has otherwise been a fairly popular event of murder, of vigilante justice, um, allegedly. I don't even know like how the algorithm works, so this is not going to go well just because I say allegedly every 15 seconds to cover my bases. Um, the other thing is proximity bias, or sort of how like our ethics are shaped by proximity. So nobody I know personally, nobody I've ever met or talked to would be like, it's okay that my kid works at a child labor factory. They're not paid and they work terrible conditions and they don't get a childhood. Nobody I've ever met would support that. Lots of people I know have Apple products. We know at Apple, do I have to say allegedly here? I just said that we know. I don't know what their current business practices are, but we know that as a company, they have used child labor in other countries. And so we're okay buying Nike or Apple or whatever major brand that is probably using child labor still to this day because it's happening far away in a different country. We have a very low proximity. We're not close to that. That's not probably our race, our ethnicity, our cultural background. And so we're not impacted by it where we would be impacted by it if it was our own kid or if it was a kid from our neighborhood or we had a factory in town that, you know, had some deceased children's bodies in the dumpster at the end of the work week every week. Like, if that was in our neighborhood, we would feel differently about it because of the proximity, right? Um, this is pretty true across the board, like ethically sourced clothes, ethically sourced technology. I will say, like, the diamond industry has been interesting to sort of keep track of, and like, not like I'm tracking the diamond industry, but how like the price of diamonds that have been made in a lab has really killed selling diamonds like elsewhere because while for rich people, I think the suffering does make it more valuable. For most people, that's not a selling point. They're like, "Ooh, a kid might have died getting this diamond for you," versus like, Steve in the lab made this one, and he lives in an apartment and has two cats and is a pretty happy guy. Thanks, Steve. I think most of us are going to pick like Steve's diamond that was grown in a lab versus the one that caused a child to potentially die. So proximity bias does play an impact in how a lot of people, consumers in this late stage capitalism model, spend their money. Like as long as it is far enough removed, either geographically or culturally, or there's enough levels of like cover, like Nike doesn't use child labor, but Nike contracts with this other company that definitely uses child labor. So like that's sort of where these unethical business practices also take advantage of proximity bias. It's far enough away where we can sort of like not be as bothered by it or try and convince ourselves to not be as biased by it or not bothered by it. So uh, yeah, proximity bias definitely comes into it. I think proximity actually affects a lot of our ethics. I think again, just going back to some of like the larger number stuff, like we just struggle to process that stuff. I think social media is interesting in the sense that like watching a genocide happen in real time looks different because we can see some of it in social media. We can see the human suffering. We can see videos sometimes live of dead bodies that are being caused by atrocities, and also like then we get bad media literacy, we get bad faith actors who are trying to use that for propaganda as well, both for and against um, violence. It's just say like, "Hey, are you killing kids? That's not okay. You're in the wrong." Right? Like, is a 4-year-old dying because of what you're doing? Stop doing that. And so like that's not real bare bones, but that's not a bad standard of ethics. And so a company that is definitely doing things that's killing 4-year-olds has to sort of try and backtrack and frame that in a different way through their propaganda, their messaging, and knowing that there are these cognitive biases out there that they can sort of take advantage of is what keeps them in business. I'm reminded of Marshall McLuhan's book, The Medium is the Massage, which is supposed to be the medium is the message, but it's a typo, and he loved it, so he kept it because the way the message is the medium by which the message is spread does massage the way you think about it. Sort of why he kept it. That medium is the massage, but the medium that you're consuming this stuff from also impacts it. Again, watching CNN, which is bought by the billionaire ruling class. If you're reading the Washington Post, you don't get to see those comic strips that make Jeffrey Bezos look like a bad guy because he started banning them. Because that's why you buy a newspaper. That's why you buy Twitter if you're Elon Musk, because you don't want people to say bad things about you. And if you get to choose what people see and what they don't, like you're going to use that to your benefit if you're a capitalist who has no real skills and has never created or done anything useful in your life and has just made money off of other people's labor, allegedly. Uh, the other thing is a weird space we're sort of in with our current ethics and morals is like a lot of us get overwhelmed with thinking about a 9/11 every single week or 100,000 deaths. Even COVID, which like cost a million Americans their lives unnecessarily because of how badly we handled it compared to other countries, like that's just too big of a thing for us to be able to process in real time. So I think that kind of creates like this moral burnout. There's probably a better phrase that people have actually studied. Uh, but yeah, like we can get burned out on that where it's just easier to check out or like take the propaganda messaging around it so that we don't have to deal with the ins and outs of it, which I think is problematic. Um,
So one of the ways in which like this is really falling flat um, around mainstream media messaging, and any outlet that's really owned by a billionaire, because it's the only people who are defending this, um, is an appeal to emotion. Again, like he had kids. Won't someone think of the children? The old fallacy. Won't someone think of the children? The Simpsons has spoofed this for years. It's something I've talked about and written about elsewhere. Um, but that like that just appeal to emotion falls a little bit flat when more people are more able to think my mom, my grandma, my auntie, myself, my best friend, whomever in their life has been affected negatively by the for-profit healthcare system is like, no, United Healthcare sucks. Like as a provider who used to take insurance when I started out, like UHC was always a pain to deal with. They were garbage. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I would spend hours a week on the phone with some low level intern who hadn't even finished their bachelor degree yet, or maybe just had their bachelor's. Not throwing shade. Psychology is a weird field where you pretty much need to go to grad school. Separate topic for a separate day. But somebody who had not the experience, not the licensure, not the education that I had, being like, oh, well, I don't know why you need so many sessions. They're at 8. So why haven't you fixed their 20-year marriage yet? And like, because you can't do that in 8 sessions. I'm very good at my job and not that good. At least not all the time. Sometimes 5, 6 sessions, we have a major breakthrough and something unlocks and we're golden. That is rare. And again, the algorithm that they're going off of isn't like when do most people make enough progress to be done with therapy? The algorithm they're going off of is when do we stop making a profit? So, and that got worse and worse for a while, very early in my career, talking like 2010, 2011. Um, I would often get 12 sessions, not from United Healthcare, but from a better tier of insurance company. Then it dropped to 8. And then, sometimes I get 3 through an EAP, an employee assistance program. Some insurance companies wouldn't cover couples therapy. Some insurance companies would only cover certain diagnoses. So again, like I can say firsthand, I saw my clients suffer regularly because of these policies, let alone my own headache and suffering of talking to a twerp on the phone who didn't know what they were talking about and was just trying to read from a script from me, and spending my time advocating for my clients while not getting paid. So like, while the insurance company was making billions of dollars profit and trying to pay me less, fuck insurance companies. And again, like, I'm not unbiased in this, right? Like, I have loudly said multiple times, probably recorded on the internet, that insurance companies are the Antichrist. I'm not religious anymore, so that doesn't mean a whole lot, but like, they're the worst. And a for-profit system really brings out the worst in them, and then deregulated uh, uh, a deregulated not even deregulated government, deregulated business practices by a government which has decided that corruption, when it's called lobbying, is legal, and bribery, as long as it's a gift given after the fact, is also legal. Like, this is a system that is captured by money and corruption. So, not getting better before it gets worse. Like that person who knows where all the cheats are in Mario Kart and keeps taking them. And so when you get a blue shell, you're definitely going to use it. That's the ethics. Look at how I tied this back to Mario Kart. I never knew where the cheats in Mario Kart were because I didn't have N64 because I grew up poor. So that's also how privilege comes into this. Wealth inequality, y'all. It is a real problem. Looking worse than it did during the French Revolution. So that appeal to emotion really falls, getting back on topic here, that appeal to emotion really falls flat when the in-group out-group bias that's at play is that more people are negatively affected by this. There's like 800 billionaires, but there's far fewer people who are in that billionaire class in group that they're scared, far fewer CEOs making millions of dollars a year by denying people life-saving healthcare. And so the ethics, yeah, so that in group, most of us are in the group not billionaire, right? So like, that's a very small in group. The rest of us are in the out group, or we're in the in group of people who are negatively affected by a for-profit healthcare system, which is a very large group. Where else this starts to fall flat is a false equivalency bias. So trying to say the alleged murder of a CEO is just as bad as killing thousands of people a week, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of people a month, or not a month, a year, through this system. And like, so again, the idea, the proximity is we can envision somebody. We have literally the video. I saw it earlier today, prepping for this video, of somebody pulling a gun with a silencer on and shooting somebody. We can see that and be like, crime, right? Because, that's how we've been conditioned to think about crime, not in the sense that crime is just a social construct. Because the crime is a CEO hitting and send on an email that says, yeah, let's start denying people who need chemo, because who's to say if people who have stage 4 cancer really need chemo or not. And again, so I would like that false equivalency of these are not equal, even if you start to, and I would say you have to get people in this headset that like hitting that keystroke is the same as pulling that trigger. The false equivalency comes in where like those two things are not the same, because the healthcare system kills hundreds of thousands of people a year, right? A year. And we know that these healthcare companies are making billions of dollars of profit. Their profits are soaring. And so again, the proximity bias comes in. Like, my whole idea around this video was that proximity ethics, like how our ethics are affected by proximity. We have this idea that like shareholders are these like shadowy beings who like meet in boardrooms and make these decisions, but like a lot of times shareholders are just like the fucking CEOs who are making these decisions anyway. Just demonetized myself. I'm pretty sure I can't say died or killed or murdered, probably say unalived or whatever, so I guess I can swear away. But like, who are doing company buybacks and stock buybacks and all this shit. Like, this isn't, now we're just swearing because I'm worked up. This isn't some like mystery shadow thing of like, this awful billionaire over here is shareholder, he's making the CEO do it. Like, no, they're one and the same. They might not be serving on the board, but like, it's the same people. These shareholders are people who are invested in the company and are probably actively working in the company. Like, yeah, Jerry Jones owner of the Dallas Cowboys, probably has shares in a bunch of different stuff, and like he's not calling the shots on it. He's that shadowy shareholder figure. But like again, he's an unethical human. I can say that because he's a billionaire. Like there's not an ethical way to have that much money. So, ugh, this topic is very upsetting to me. Um, so yeah, like it's a logical fallacy to pretend that like two wrongs don't make a right. Like no, 100,000 wrongs might be made right by one other person doing a wrong, and the jury trial will be fascinating. I don't think he's going to get acquitted, but like that'd be real great and fun if enough jurors were like, nope, dude's Batman. This is all okay. Right? Because like some of us are, I'm a comic book nerd, like the morals of superheroes are pretty murky. Like they are breaking the law. You can't dress up at night and beat people up and give them, you know, blunt force head trauma and then tie them up and leave them at the police station and like be a good guy, especially not if you're a billionaire, part of the ruling class. Looking at you, Bruce Wayne, Tony Stark. So the ethics of like the vigilante justice are murky, but like again, it's this idea that like people will be negatively affected by health insurance companies. People will have this idea of like vigilante justice that we've sort of been socialized on. The more nuanced take on like superhero ethics is like they serve an authoritarian purpose that like might makes right. Read an interview from Alan Moore, who thinks that superheroes are bad and comics are bad for adults to read. The last thing I'm going to talk about is just homeostasis. That human beings are geared towards homeostasis. Our brains are wired for that. I talk about homeostasis a lot because I'm a systems therapist. So we think about ecosystems. Ecosystems we know are driven towards homeostasis, but you might think of it as like the status quo bias. That the idea that keeping things the same is inherently good. Our brains are wired for change being scary, just because we can't be certain. We're playing probabilities of that outcome, and so even if we know something is bad, we know it, and our brain finds comfort in knowing it versus the potential change or risk of something really changing a lot. So we have like a status quo bias in effect here, or this drive towards homeostasis. Class consciousness, a revolution, changing that stuff is going to be scary for a great deal of the population. Um, and they're the people who are going to say violence is never the answer. And like to that, I'm also going to sort of highlight that false equivalence. Like the class warfare is already violent. If you think pulling a trigger on a gun is different than hitting a keystroke that denies hundreds of thousands of people healthcare, like you're wrong. I don't I You're entitled to your opinion and your opinion is wrong and you're an idiot for holding that opinion. Like there's never been a peaceful revolution. Does that mean we should advocate for murder? Not necessarily. Wink, wink. No, like no YouTube algorithm. We shouldn't advocate for violence. But like the Boston Tea Party as like, woo, Americans, go revolution, like is violent, right? Like healthcare being denied to someone who needs it is violent. Again, if you're doing something that leads directly to the death of a 4-year-old, that's not great. So I'm against violence in the sense that like, yeah, we shouldn't be killing kids. The part of this that is violent is the healthcare industry. That's already violent. The class warfare is already violent. It's mostly, almost exclusively, going from that ruling class down to the peasants, the feudal system that we have that we call late stage capitalism. Like the ruling class perpetrating violence against the non-ruling class. So it's already violent, and I think it's disingenuous to say that like violence won't solve the answer. Like violence is already inherent in the system. It's already part of the problem. I'm not sold on violence being an answer exclusively, but like that violence might be property damage, and human lives are more important than property. So yeah, I can't say it's ethical um, for legal reasons to do property damage, but like pretending that like a mob or a protest burning down headquarters of something, not going to name names here, but like if that were to happen, what would the news be? Like, oh, look at this unruly mob, they're destroying property. Well, like we shouldn't be killing people. The, let's say, enforcement arm of the government shouldn't be kneeling on people's necks and murdering them. Just as a for instance, like, and then pretending that that is equivalent to setting a building on fire. It's not. right? We have to actually like weigh the equivalency of there are people in the building. Don't burn buildings with people in them. But property destruction as a form of protest is like violent, quote unquote, and totally acceptable. The system is already violent. The violence is only flowing one way. It's top down right now. So it will be interesting to see, sort of as the case plays out and the courtroom drama plays out, to see what's going on with our protagonist from Mario Kart and the ethics around throwing blue shells at the privileged few. It's also recording this on January 6th, so just I don't I don't know. I don't know what's up with modern society. It's not great, I can tell you that. Might be time for a revolution, an ethical one, he said, covering his tracks. Allegedly, anything I've said in the last 31 minutes and 11 seconds is alleged. But no, the psychological concepts I talk about are legit. Those are things that I know and have studied and deal with on a regular basis. Sorry, I didn't have a more fun topic. If you're tuning into the podcast, it has been about a month since we have a new episode. So if you're curious about the general direction, like we're back. I just had a busy month and it was hard to schedule guests. So we will be back to our normal programming here. If you're on the YouTube and checking it out, like, hey, somebody just subscribed and they sent me proof that they subscribed to my channel, and we're like, can you review this song? And that's what I'm gonna do next. So if you want me to cover a topic, whether that's video game analysis in the real world. I talk about movies. I'm a big pro wrestling nerd, comic book nerd. I've got a CM Punk video in the works, got an Aaron Rodgers videos in the works. I've been, in theory, working on a Watchmen video for like 2 years. So a lot of stuff, but also, the Tool fans who are happy when I do Tool songs, and apparently the Renegades, spoiler alert, who are subscribed to my channel so that I review a song they want me to do. So if there's something you want to hear me talk about, drop down in the comments. Like, subscribe, are great ways to get me more likely to talk about the topic that you want to hear me talk about. If you're on the podcast, thanks so much for tuning in. I will have some regular programming again next week with a guest. I have some cool guests lined up. I do my best to have an episode each week. I am a mental health professional. I own my own practice. I run that by myself. I have a media person who helps me out. Shout out to Kenny, who makes a lot of the stuff that I do look and sound better than it should. But yeah, sometimes I just run out of time or don't get to things. Sorry. Try and be consistent as I can be with the content coming out. But with all that in mind, thanks for tuning in. Take care of yourself. Take care of somebody else. Peace.